Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Today's video hopefully will be helpful for most everyone that watches this, at least some part. I have sat down and kind of written down 17 things that you should probably be looking to stock up on, looking to do, getting ready for all the stuff that's going on. I'll go into more details here in a minute in the video, and I've separated it kind of between the more experienced, those of us that are a little bit more experienced and have been doing this for a while, maybe your basics, your food, your water and stuff, you kind of got down. And then also for the beginners, ones that are just waking up to this. And give you hopefully some ideas, helpful hints and tips to get you started so that you're hopefully as prepared as you can be for the things that are happening and changing around us. I want to mention, before I get going too much into the video, that we are planning another local meeting. We have them on a monthly basis here in my area, and they are open to the public. This is in the Ozarks, the Missouri Ozarks, and kind of central Missouri Ozarks. So Texas County is where we are located for the meeting place. And if you want more details on that, you can shoot me an email down at this address that should be popping up. It's August 22nd. That's on a Sunday. The meeting kind of starts around 2, goes to 4 or 5. The doors open usually around noon. So that people can come and mingle and get to know each other, that kind of stuff. And we do have refreshments, and it's a full family event, so bring the kids. It's a very large facility, and there's always kids there playing inside and outside. There's playground equipment. It's a pretty nice place. So if you can attend, just let me know, and I'll give you the details and how to get there. And we usually have between 50 and 100 people show up, just to give you a heads up on the amount. The reason why I'm putting this list out, and I do these kind of things from time to time, but they always change a little bit. And they change based on the severity of what's going on and how things are being affected. I am not saying by putting this list out that, number one, this is the complete list that will get you completely prepared for what's ahead. No, these are just some tips. And if I went through everything to do, this would be an extremely long video. So these are just some kind of highlights to maybe spark your imagination and encourage you along the way. And again, also, I'm not saying that you need to go do this right now today because the end is, the sky is falling. There's actually several reasons that are happening right now that I think it's a good time to make sure you're ready for what's coming. We don't know exactly what's happening. We just know that things are changing. Watch the last couple of videos I've done the last few days. They've been super big hits. A lot of people watching them, and you can go back and see just some of the things, not all, but some of the things that's just happening in the world around us as we speak. So one of the big things is shortages, potential shortages, or just shipping and supply chain problems. I'm still getting lots of emails from you folks talking about how much it's costing you to ship things, receive things for your business. Some of you are reporting that you're being told by your suppliers that other train lines are being suspended for 1 to 4 weeks at a time in different areas, that you're having problems getting stuff off of the docks, off the boats onto the dock, into the truck, and to your warehouse or facility. It's just an ongoing problem. And then, of course, there's also the weather-related stuff, the natural stuff that may not be always so natural. It could be manipulated. It doesn't really matter. It's still happening, and it's happening all over the world. Flooding, rains, freezing, cold, hot, dry, just on and on and on, all over the place. And that's causing disruption, and that's causing problems. There's also other things like, what if, the dollar becomes less and less value? We can continue to go down this path of inflation to where you're able to purchase less and less because the purchasing power of your currency is less. It could even get to the point of hyperinflation. So that's a reason to prepare. There's also reason to prepare, because we've talked about this lately, of more and more nations putting restrictions on what you can do, where you can go, what you can purchase, because you don't have the little thing right here. And for those of you that are, don't want any part of that, and I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, that's your personal, belief, your personal decision. But you shouldn't be, punished for that. And if that comes to that point here in the United States, it may be difficult for you to acquire the goods that you need to survive. So there's actually several things happening all at once. And that's probably why we should take things pretty serious right now. I want to start off here with these. Like I said, there's 14 things. 14 things. I've broken it up into 7 for the experienced folk out there, and then 7 for the new guys. And I'll try to go through these as fast as I can so that this doesn't end up being a very long video. So for you experienced people, and now listen, your experienced people might find some use on the 7 for the newbies, and the newbies might find some good stuff on the experienced preppers. But I just did kind of break it up in that way. One of the things that you should start working on, if you haven't already, and I mentioned this in yesterday's video, is tools. Tools and parts to maintain your equipment. There seems to be a lot of problems. There has been for the last 16 months, and I think it's probably only going to worsen when the information that I'm receiving, the intel from you listeners, of companies that supply equipment and parts and tools. They're having a hard time getting those things still, and in some cases it's getting worse. So make sure you have the tools that you need, and I always recommend having backups to your electric, modern, technological tools. So if the only way you have to drill a hole is with your electric drill, you should probably have an alternative to that. And then also just the parts to maintain the things. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to acquire every part, but think of just general maintenance. Should you have maybe a couple of belts for your vehicle? Things like, different joints that you would have to, ball bearings, things like that you would be able to replace on your own. An extra car battery, things like that you could have stocked away in case it becomes difficult to get those. Canning and food preservation supplies. This is really important, and I have seen more of it on the shelves in the last few months, but back during the beginning of the health crisis, that stuff dried up very quickly, and I suspect we will see that again. And if you grow a lot of food, which you should, if you're not able to preserve it because you don't have the equipment or the tools, the cans, the jars, the lids, that kind of stuff, then it doesn't really do a whole lot of good to grow a lot of food if you can't preserve it. Same thing if you, raise animals for meat. You need to be able to preserve that stuff. Along with the animals in your homestead, animal food. Stock up on that kind of stuff. I've been hearing people are having problems in certain areas getting dog food and cat food, and I understand it's not hitting every area. I hear people say, well, things are fine where I live. That's right, because America is a really big place, and I would not expect it all to happen all at once everywhere, but it is happening in certain areas. And if it's happening in other areas, it means that it's a good chance that it could eventually happen in your area. But animal food for your pets, animal food for your livestock especially. Stocking up on that, having a way to feed them, and having backup plans, figuring out what you're able to produce on your little homestead to feed your animals. Also shelters, equipment to maintain the animals, anything to do with your animals, because if you're raising animals to feed you, you need to have the shelter and the equipment and all the tools to take care of them, because you don't know if you'll be able to get it. You don't know what will be take months to get to you, or maybe the price will increase to the point that you can't afford it. Communication equipment. I talk about this often. Make sure you have a way to communicate with others. Shortwave radios, battery operated, hand crank radios, CB radios, FRS radios, and I believe, very importantly, some form of ham radio or amateur radio. Handhelds, mobiles that you would run off of DC power. I've made videos on that in the past. You can acquire that stuff for a low price. You do, of course, need a license to operate ham radio waves, but that's not very hard to get a license. Fuel, electricity, heat, cool. Again, this stuff may not completely go away. It just may become really expensive or hard to find or hard to buy, or may take a while. And maybe you heat your home with propane, or you heat your home with wood heat. Do you have enough of that? Have you stocked up on it? Right now is probably a better time to buy it than come this winter, when you realize that there's massive shortages, or the prices have gone up, or you can't get anyone to deliver it to you because of whatever reason. So make sure you have enough of that. Right now, a lot of people right now, I mean, it's hot most of the places in the country right now. And you're not thinking about buying or stocking up on, say, firewood. But it's probably a good time to look around and try to find people that can do it. You'll probably pay less money for it right now than you will come November. Heating and cooling your home. What is your plan for that? What if there's a grid down, or again, you just aren't able to get all the fuel or the electricity that you need to take care of your home? And so what is your plans for heating your home? Do you need to work on solar power? Do you need to install a wood stove? Do you need to, look at other ways to acquire the power to keep yourself from freezing to death, or to keep yourself from burning up? And freezing is more important than being hot. Being hot's mostly miserable, as long as you stay hydrated, and if you get too hot, you can sit in the shade. But being cold, especially in some regions, can be very deadly. And you can die from heat, I get it. But it's usually there's more people that die from cold. Reassess your security plan for your homestead and adjust as needed. That's probably all I really should say about that, because I'm talking specifically to you experienced ones. What do you need to acquire for that kind of stuff? Are certain things you need to mow certain areas? You don't have enough clear shots, clear space around your home, different things like that. Do you have places that someone could hide behind and get too close to you? Just kind of reassess that. And then last, for the experienced ones, seasonal and work clothing. A lot of people forget this kind of stuff. Again, I'm not saying that this will go away. It may become very expensive. It may have a lot of shortages, or you may not be able to go purchase the stuff because laws may be changed that will restrict you getting out, or restrict you going and buying stuff. So always have extra, gloves lying around, both for winter and for working. Make sure your stuff like your boots, your winter gear, coats, all that kind of stuff is up to par and ready to go. And then now for you newbies, and I don't say that in a derogatory way. There are still a lot of people tuning into this channel, and others that are just waking up, that are just getting started. And I know that there's channels out there, and there's people that are saying, listen, if you haven't prepped by now, it's too late for you. Just go stick your head in the sand and just whatever. I am not. I'm not one of those. And sure, if you're just now getting started, odds are you're probably not going to be able to be as prepped as someone like myself, or even others that are much more prepared than myself. But it doesn't mean that you can't do things along the way to get prepared. It depends on how serious you want to be, how much you want to invest in it with your time and your money. And I will get to a money thing here in just a little bit, so bear with me. Number one, if you're just starting off, and like I said, some of your experienced ones, you might be able to get something out of this too, so stay tuned. Food is always important, and that's where they're going to get us, more than anything else. Because if they can control our food, they can control our access to it. They know that when we get hungry, and when our children are complaining that they're hungry, they know that we would do whatever we want, whatever they want. So make sure you have enough food to get you by, because we just don't know exactly how bad it's going to be. Start with dry goods because they're cheap. You can still buy beans and rice and pastas and oatmeal, things like that, quite cheap. And then also canned goods, going to places like an Aldi if you have one around, or maybe discount grocery stores. A lot of times you can buy canned food quite cheap, and they still run things on sale. I've heard of people reporting, the other day someone sent me an email and said they bought a whole bunch of canned green beans where they lived, or maybe it was beans or peas for 20 cents a can, and they stocked up heavy on them. Be looking for stuff like that. Write down what you buy in a normal month's time for your groceries, okay? And then take that list and figure out what in that list has a pretty long shelf life. And most things that don't have to be put in a refrigerator have at least a year shelf life. You know, things like ketchup and mayo and, you know, honey, certain pastas, seasonings, cereals, things like that that you just normally use every month or two where you're buying. And this stuff's gonna last at least a year or so. And try to stock up extra on that stuff. Put some effort into buying. You know, if you go through 2 or 3 things of ketchup in a year's time, buy 5 or 6 of them. That way you have at least a couple of years, you know, for ketchup. Make sure you're storing this stuff in a pretty cool and dark place. And most of the stuff, if it's sealed up, will last at least a year or two. And then if you're storing your dry goods, if you're just starting off, leaving them, you know, like let's say you buy a bag of rice. It's not good to leave it in its original container. They're not always sealed up real good. Bugs can get in there. So food grade buckets are probably the best for beginners, and they're cheap. You can purchase them at hardware stores, places like Walmart. Make sure they're food grade. They should, if they're food grade, they will say on them food grade buckets. If you just put the stuff directly in the bucket, it will last for at least a couple of years just like that. But I do recommend for long-term storage of putting, you know, your dry goods in a Mylar bag, which they make them for 5-gallon buckets, seal it up, and then put the lid on the bucket. And if you do that, it can last a very long time. And then just a little tip, flour already ground does not have a long shelf life regardless of how long you store it or how you store it. It just doesn't. 6 months, maybe a year, and it starts getting rancid real fast. So flour's not something I would store a lot of, but wheat and grinding it into flour is. Water, figure out your water source. Have multiple ways to treat and clean the water. Whether through chemical treating, heat treating, or filtration treating, or all of the above, which is what I recommend. Storing water is good, and I would have water stored, but you also need a source for long term because you can't store enough water for your whole family for 6 months. Most people can't. So make sure you have plans of where to get more water. First aid. Over-the-counter meds, prescription meds, medicinal herbs, because you can't store up enough you know, prescription over-the-counter meds to do you forever, and those things have a shelf life on them, and typically not a very long shelf life. But medicinal herbs, if dried and stored properly, can last a very long time, and also if they're in a tincture, an alcohol tincture. Make sure you have first aid books, medical books, and herbal books so that you know how to use this stuff and take care of things. You may come to a time that you don't want to go to the hospital on something that you might be able to treat on your own or go to a doctor. I'm not advising that. I'm not giving any medical advice. I'm just saying we don't know how bad things will get, and you may have to do some of that stuff at home on your own. Begin a plan on how your life could change with all this stuff that you're hearing about, and then how are you going to adapt to it? Because that's the biggest thing. We have to adapt and overcome. And so try to imagine in your mind all the stuff that you're hearing about, how bad it could get, and how it's going to affect the life that you're living and what you need to do to adapt. Where are you going to get food and supplies? Bartering, possibly. Communities, possibly, if you live near Amish or communities that may also be not part of the system, you might be able to barter and work with them, or prepping communities. Start making those connections now, though. Security, how to lay low and not draw attention. And that's going to be really important. You know, there's information that's been coming out almost daily about how there's more and more of monitoring folks like us. You know, there was a general, one of the commanding generals in the U.S. Army was tweeting about, you know, that they should be turning in people that think like us. You know, the major tech companies have all come together and they formed this basically a list that they're collecting data on all of us. I mean, we knew all this all along, but now they're at least becoming public with it, admitting it, and they're turning this data over to governments. So you want to be able to lay low and not draw attention, and you need to figure that out. It's called a gray man. If you do need to leave from where you're at, where are you going to go? And when are you going to leave? Are you going to leave when the worst of it's happening, or are you going to have a plan to figure out when to leave before it all gets bad? Bugging out is not necessarily a high priority for me because I live in a bug out location, but I understand not everyone does. And so that's something you should be thinking about more and more. Produce your food. You need to figure out, if you're not doing it already, you should be. Start making plans. Even if you live in an apartment, you can grow stuff in a container. That may not sustain you, but at least it's giving you some training on how to grow food. Plan on try to start a fall garden if you're able to. And then buy seeds and tools, garden tools to garden, because seeds, they've been hard to get really good seeds for about a year now anyways, in some places. And I suspect that will continue to happen. So make sure you have a good stock on them. Also, ammo and firearms. I know I don't talk about it a lot, but it is extremely important. The prices have been coming down. And the availability is a little bit better than it was, say, 6-8 months ago. So if you don't have what you need, I don't know if it's going to get much better or not, but I would certainly consider stocking up more on that kind of stuff if you need it. And then last, number 14, library. Build a library. Doesn't mean you have to have the bookshelves, but you need the books. Gardening books, repair books, farming books, homesteading books, first aid books, medical books, history books, science books, homeschooling books. Because you may not have the access to the internet. Even myself, and I'm really trying to break myself of this. If I'm trying to work on something, work on a vehicle, do something, it's so easy to pick up your phone and Google, how do I do this? If that phone doesn't work, the internet's taken away, or it's become too intrusive into your life to use, how are you going to look up how to fix stuff? Go to secondhand bookstores, thrift stores, flea markets, places like that. You can buy old, cheap books that pretty much fills all that and more for quite cheap prices. I've bought medical books, books for nursing students, paramedics classes, things like that for $1, $2 a piece. Old do-it-yourself repair books, and I've bought entire collections of those books for just a few dollars. And then also, you want to be able to teach your children the truth, and they're rapidly changing what the truth is. And so getting it in modern books and online is not the best place. So you want to make sure you have the stuff to teach your children, well, real things, true things. And then also Bibles, because I'm sure they'll eventually come for those too. If you're planning on spending a lot of money in the next coming weeks to stock up on things, and some of you will do that. Some of you may have $2,000 or $3,000 or whatever set aside, and you're like, you know what? We're going to take this money and we're just going to go out and we're going to invest. We're going to go to Costco. We're going to go to Sam's Club. We're going to, whatever it is. I recommend that you use only cash in doing that kind of stuff. Again, they're monitoring stuff. They're monitoring transactions. They're monitoring what you're doing. I wouldn't go out, if you have $2,000 that you really have nothing else to do with it but to go to Costco and stock up on food, I would use cash. I would also, and I don't recommend typically lying to people, but in this instance, I would have a cover story. One time, we went to, it was either a Costco or Sam's, and we were stocking up on stuff. Some of it was preps, most of it was preps, but we were stocking up. And I actually had a couple people stop and ask, "Oh, what are you doing, man? Are you like one of them prepper people?" And I didn't tell them, "Oh, sure I am. I'm not there to evangelize," because you never know who they are or who they're gonna, tell or whatever. So come up with a cover story, I recommend. Like, oh, well, we run a little business, we have a restaurant, we have a food, whatever it is, to cover for that. And I'm not saying you have to do it. If you have a moral, you don't agree with that morally, that's fine. But I think when it comes to protecting yourself and protecting your family, personally, I would do that. Folks, remember, we don't know how long it's going to be until things really get worse. It could be months. It could be years. It could be a couple of weeks. And so I'm not trying to tell you that there's a major urgency to go out and do these things, but these are things that you should be looking into in a very serious way because things are rapidly changing. They are changing with speed and intensity, just like John Kerry said the first of this year when referencing how things would change under the new administration and moving towards the Great Reset. Specifically, he said that, moving towards the Great Reset, that things would change with speed and intensity here in the United States, and they in fact are. So don't get caught with nothing and empty-handed and caught off guard. Make sure you're doing what you can to prepare now as long as you can. All right, folks, thank you all for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.